In 1929, a film emerged from the silent era, capturing hearts and challenging societal norms. Diary of a Lost Girl. Diary of a Lost Girl delves into the complexities of morality, sexuality, and redemption with a rawness that was daring for its time. Directed by the visionary G.W. Pabst and starring the captivating Louise Brooks, this cinematic masterpiece navigates the journey of a Thymian, a young woman cast into a world of darkness after being betrayed by those closest to her. As she grapples with the consequences of society's judgments and her own desires, Thymian's diary becomes a sanctuary where her innermost thoughts and struggles are laid bare. Through evocative cinematography and Brooks's mesmerizing performance, Diary of a Lost Girl challenges audiences to confront the hypocrisy of societal norms and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Join us on a journey through the shadows of the human psyche, where innocence is lost, but hope remains eternal. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Diary of a Lost Girl. All right, here we go. Will, we're back at it. Diary of a Lost Girl. Release date, September 12th, 1929. Tagline reads, after falling pregnant by a pharmacist and refusing to marry a young woman, is ejected from her home and sent to a strict girls' reform school. This is directed by G.W. Pabst, distributed by Hom Film HG, and the runtime ran an hour and 51 minutes, Will. This starred Louise Brooks, as we are pronouncing this, Thymian. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Thymian works for me.
Will, my initial reactions before I got to get there, if I had to play a little fill in the blank, I think this movie was incredible. I really do. I thought this movie was incredible. That'd be my word to choose from. I just finished watching it the last couple hours, so it is fresh in my mind.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the story structure of the way that they kind of bookend the story. Is it perfect? No, there's a lot of plot holes and things like that. You know, when it comes to the Count Osdorf or Orsdorf, how he became, he wasn't a rich man by any means, and we get to that later in the plot, but somehow was still able to just work his way around the brothel as long as he did.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was my word of choice. Incredible. I don't know what your word of choice. Fill in the blank for me, Will. What would you think this movie was for you?
Oh, man, Incredible is a good one. I'll oh man, put me on the spot.
Sorry.
I'll kind of keep it in that same family and go Amazing.
Okay.
I thought that the performance of Louise Brooks was kind of incredible. I thought there was, like you said, with the plot, there's a couple things that I had questions about. I was typing away on like writer board, like what does plot convenience mean? Like because of the way the kind of third act out plays out. But yeah, no, I
Yeah,
thought
good
it was.
call. Good call on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought overall this was a really good experience, and the first time that I was nearly brought to tears in these movies that we've been watching over the last few weeks. So
Interesting. Yeah, elaborate on that. Interesting. What I mean, is it just the trials and tribulations that Timian goes throughout her story, or is there something more specific that you're talking about?
yeah, no, there's a couple of moments specifically. One when she goes back to find her child. I thought that was really powerful. I thought her, without having any words, just her performance, and you could feel her pain and her sorrow. I thought that was a really powerful moment. And then also, at the will reading, when she hands the money over to, her father's wife, and the kids. I thought there was something really incredible going on there too in her performance. So those two moments in particular, I thought were just really well done, and her performance again was just amazing.
Yeah, silent films, and I think we talked about this a little bit on the show already, is just the way that they kind of focus in on the face, right? Everything is here is how they tell the story. Um, I just think that Louise Brooks pops off the screen, and not only her, but I thought Edith Meinhardt, the woman that played Erica, I was
Mm-hmm.
really captivated by her performance in this movie. I thought she was a strong supporting actress, uh, so much so that I'll have some interesting notes on her that was just devastating to read when I did some research on her. But I thought she did a really great job of being kind of the backbone for Thymian throughout the movie, right? And then at
Yeah.
the end of the movie, when we'll talk about it in the plot, but like at the end of the movie, when she needs for Louise Brooks to be the backbone for the first time, not just for herself, but for Erica, it's I just
Yeah.
thought Erica's performance or Edith Meinhardt's performance was again, using your word, you used mine, was amazing. I just think I thought she wasn't on the screen nearly as much as Louise Brooks was, but I just thought it was a nice compliment to the movie that was desperately needed because they needed each other, right?
Sure. Yep. No, she was also very, very good. The what was the father's wife, the housemaiden that he ends up marrying? I can't remember her
You
name.
talking about Meta?
I Yeah, Meta. She also was really good in this too. I there are a few moments in there too, especially at the end, kind of in the climax scene with the will reading, where you could tell that she was, she was had done this before, right? She knew what she was doing. So I overall, I thought this was really good. I mean, we'll probably talk a little bit about some of the male performances, which weren't as good, and maybe on purpose. I'm not sure, but yeah, the female leads and the supporting actresses in this were all, I thought, really well done.
Yeah, we've been watching. This is probably our 10th, 11th, 12th film, roughly. I'm just curious as to do you feel like we've seen a strong male performance thus far? Are we,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like, because I can think of like Joan Crawford, Anita Page, again, black male. I forget the lady's name, Dolores Costello. There's these names that have popped off the page, and maybe that's the way Hollywood was set up. But this isn't a Hollywood film. This is a German silent film. You know what I mean? And it's still telling an interesting mess or theme during a time where patriarchy is large uh, in all parts of the world. So,
Sure.
does any male performances stand out to you on the movies that we've watched so far? And if so, what is that saying about this kind of like small sample size of movies that we've chosen so far?
Yeah, I mean, part of it could be our inclinations, right? The movies that we're choosing. We might be drawn to strong female leads. I know we both our history is to be drawn to strong women because of who raised us. But I think also like I'm wondering if we're kind of butting up in the male performances specifically against how men acted at that time, right?
Sure.
So just very stoic and very like, boisterous, and just all the performances have been very, kind of stiff. And I wonder if maybe that's just the the way they were supposed to act in that time. So maybe that's what we're kind of butting up against. Charlie Chaplin was really good in The Circus, and then also there was a few of the priests in Passion of Joan d'Arc that I thought had pretty good performances too. But yeah, I think you're right. We're kind of right now in a phase where we're seeing stronger female leads as opposed to stronger male performances. So
Yeah, man. Well, I think you actually hit the subconscious there, right? Like we were raised by strong women. And my mother, my grandmother, your grand, you know what I mean? You've got these strong figures in our lives um, that maybe subconsciously we are just kind of catering ourselves to these movies. That's an interesting point. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed the film. Well, I thought this was your pick, and I thought this was something. I sat down. I'm like, oh man, hour and 51 minutes of silent films. We haven't been spoiled with too many talkies yet, but coming off of a couple talkies in a row, I was thinking to myself, oh boy, am I prepared to go back to silent films? And yeah, there's some things that I wish we would have got answered. I think we get an idea of what happened to Elizabeth. Are we assuming it's a suicide? Is that the way you're looking at it?
Yeah, no, I think that's the where I'm at too. That's
Okay.
what I think.
Just a couple issues with the film here and there. I don't know that I buy into the motive of how Count Ozdroff, his demise. But again, it sticks with it's just a small talking point into a bigger story that isn't his story, that is Thymian's story. So let me
Mhm.
read a couple notes here that I thought were interesting, if I may.
Sure.
Firsthand, this is a German silent film. Second of all, this was an 88% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's, I see if I still have it. That's over 1,000 plus ratings.
Mhm.
Okay. That's pretty incredible. We just talked about off screen. This got a 3.9 on Letterboxd, and that was over 7,000 ratings. So there is a community of people that have seen this movie in modern day world, I guess. We kind of all take the same things from it. There's definitely a clear message to be said here.
Mhm.
And I just think that, you take these old movies like that, and especially silent films, right? And you put them on a screen for today's contemporary audience, and you just don't know how it's going to land. Are they going to critique the right things? And I think as a whole, our community of, critics of film, reviewers or whatever we are, I think we're looking at it the right way. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting too because what I'm really interested in as we go along here is what we can draw, some of the similarities we can draw from the time where these films were made into our current like political and social climates. Where what lessons have we learned? What lessons haven't we learned? What have our artists been trying to tell us all along? Like, hey, we need to fix how we act, or we need to fix our relationships, or whatever it may be. I'm really interested in that genealogy of kind of art over the course of film. So I think here we get a really good taste of, like, the issues that we see today are, they're still around. It's not like they've gone away. Maybe some of them have gotten a little bit better. Maybe not. So I think this is one of those movies where we got a taste of relationships and how we treated women about 100 years ago. So
yeah, like you said, maybe we are, maybe we're not. I just seen on the news yesterday that they've raided, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever Diddy's homes in L.A. and Miami,
mhm.
and he deserves his day in court, but apparently he's been on a jet. He's flown somewhere else, they're saying, and there's sexual, not just assault, but like
Yeah,
sexual trafficking allegations involved in this. So
yeah,
that's still a patriarchy thought of possession and things that come
mhm,
into that with those gender roles. So it's just yeah, 100 years later, still very much happening. When I was watching this movie, and I don't know if you picked up on this at all, a couple things. One, in the very beginning, I thought that there was it felt like very Epstein,
mhm.
Jazine Maxiel
Oh yeah.
thing at play, where like you've got the grandmother, I'm assuming the mother to
Mhm.
Thymian's father, who is very much aware of what Thymian's father is doing,
Yeah.
and kind of trying to, like, be the matriarchy of this family,
Mhm.
but at the same time, like, very much aware of what's going on, right? She knows that Elizabeth is probably going to go kill herself, or going to have a rough life, because this feels like a pattern, right? Meta
Oh
became like the next version of this. And at the same time, there was another movie that jumped out as far as from Timian's point of view, a movie that we loved that just came out this past year. It felt like a lot of parallels to Poor Things. It made me
oh
wonder if
sure.
Yorgos Lanthimos has ever seen this film. If I ever met the
Oh
guy, I would ask him that that very question. So, do you pick up on any of those? Forget maybe Epstein, but just on Poor Things being kind of a story structure at all.
Yeah, no, definitely thought about Poor Things in this, especially when we get to the brothel and kind of, with Louisa Brooks' character feeling everything out with herself and trying to figure out her place in the world. And there's definitely some lineage there. And then also, I mean, literally, my first note I have here is pattern of abuse. So definitely agree with you there. Like whatever Timian's father is getting up to here, it's clearly something that's been going on for ages. And I don't know if Timian's maybe not aware of it or just kind of innocent in this and not sure what's going on. But I mean, clearly something's going on that the grandmother knows about. So
Yeah, well, to me that was the opposites of knowledge versus innocence, right?
mhm.
Um, maybe early on in Timian's grandmother's life, she's faced similar things, but in a world that's still owned by patriarchs, and when women find a way to carve themselves to the top, or in a position of wealth or success, um, you know, it's all about trying to maintain that status first before empathy or before
Mhm.
doing the right moral thing. Especially during the movie, this plot, I found myself watching this and thinking, I guess thinking that Louise Brooks' character, because she's so innocent, with the fainting, I was wondering,
Yeah,
how they're going to play around with or get around the consent, or if they were just going to directly jump into rape, and like how they were going to show those things. Um, and I do wonder if our versions are more state standards that chop this up. I wonder if there's another version
mm,
out there,
sure.
pre-code film, right, that didn't have censorship. And I do wonder what that looks like, because in the movie I watched today, there was a big disclaimer that came up in the beginning that talked
Yep.
about the restoration of this film and all the pieces that might be lost due to the pre-code. Did you have that
Yeah.
same thing when you were watching?
Yeah. Yep. I watched on Amazon channel called Kino. Hadn't heard of it before, so I downloaded it and watched it on there. So same thing.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So I just wonder how much is of the story GW Pabst wanted us to see, in our
Mhm.
face versus what we ended up seeing. We'll never know. Um, anyways, I want to go back to a casting note here. Something that we've talked a little bit about casting and a little bit about the actors that played these roles. I wanted to learn more about Erica, the Edith Meinhardt character. And this is what I was kind of sad to learn, Will. I'm going to read something right out of Wikipedia. There wasn't much on her life. There was actually nothing on her life, but there wasn't much on her career. This is what it says. Edith Meinhardt's last film was made in spring of 1943, shortly before the heavy Allied bombing of Berlin began. She has never been heard of since then and may not have survived the Second World War. Um,
Mm.
I just thought that was kind of like a weird, surreal thing to read. I don't know why
Yeah.
it stuck with me, but like I read that and I was like, oh man, like real life is at work again. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
Kind of like when Paul Walker died. I think you and I were together the night Paul Walker died, and it was just like
Mm.
it was this weird thing where like real life escapes no one. And when I
Mhm.
read that, I was like, man, what a shame that happened, because I thought she did a really good job in this. And according to the little research that I did, she went on to have a nice 10-year career, or a nice 30-year career, sorry, before something like this happened. So just interesting note.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, that's sometimes we could take that for granted. I mean, you said Paul Walker. I always think of Robin Williams, someone that can bring so much joy to a person's life, and then he has so much internal strife. Is just a reminder that you need to check on people and do your best to
Yeah.
help people who need it. So
Well said, buddy. Well said. Let's get into the plot, shall we?
sure.
All right. I'm just going to read a quick synopsis, 3 paragraphs, so bear with me. I'm not going to get too specific because we'll break down some of the things as we go.
Okay.
Diary of a Lost Girl. The story revolves around Thymian Henning, played by Louise Brooks, a young woman from a bourgeoisie family who becomes pregnant after being raped by her father's assistant. When her pregnancy is discovered, Thymian is sent away to a strict reformatory for wayward girls, where she faces abuse and mistreatment at the hands of the authoritarian head mistress. Despite the harsh conditions, Thymian befriends other girls at the reformatory and forms bonds that offer her some solace. However, her suffering continues when she gives birth to a baby girl who is taken away from her shortly after. Determined to reclaim, and again, I think when I was reading this, some of these things might be based on an original version of this movie. So just take it for grain of salt here. Determined to reclaim her freedom and dignity, Thymian escapes from the reformatory and finds refuge with Erica, a sympathetic friend. As Thymian tries to rebuild her life, she encounters various challenges and temptations, such as the brothel in which she ultimately ends up at, including exploitation by unscrupulous men and moral double standards of society. Through her struggles, Thymian confronts the hypocrisy and injustices of the world around her, ultimately striving to find independence and self-worth in a society that seeks to confine and control her. That's the plot, right? That's more of just kind of a quick summary of what we've seen. If you're listening to this, we're hoping that you guys followed along and watched with us. Will, what stood out to you throughout the story of this movie?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here was it really came down to, well, there's kind of a couple of different themes that are going on. I think the first act kind of had a lot to do with kind of setting up the world in which the character occupies, right? So it has a lot to do with like positioning, especially her father and men in places of power, and how they can treat women and get away with doing things, especially the pharmacist assistant, or whoever runs the pharmacy, who ends up raping her. Um, they can get away with these types of things, but when she gets pregnant, it's her fault, and she's cast out and put into a reform school. So I think it was really kind of important for them to for Pabst to set that tension up, that expectation of like, hey, like these guys can just do whatever the hell they want, but she's gonna, she gets pregnant after she's been raped, and she's not allowed to keep her kid, and she's sent to reform school. So I think that was the kind of the underlying theme, the how we're supposed to view this world. And then the bigger theme was just her kind of navigating the world and trying to find herself in it, find her way. And I think that ends up working out pretty well throughout the whole film. When we get to the third act, I'll kind of pick some nits with that, because I didn't love how the story was super convenient at the end. But yeah, I think that's the two bigger themes here are like, hey, this is the world, and this is how she's gonna get through it. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said that they blame the female. It's like when you're looking at the human cycle, right? You're born into a world. You look at your mother and your father as your, there's an innate trust right from the very beginning that this
yeah,
person has my best interest in mind, right? And yet, and they don't do a great job, maybe, and you've already alluded to this a little bit, but like there's this conversation about like how much does Louise Brooks know? Like what is the age we think Louise Brooks is, or Thymian is at this point, right? You could say, is she a teenager? Is she, 18? I'm just going to go around 18, 19 years of age. So you got to ask yourself, like, how great was her father at keeping her from seeing how he modeled and how he uses and abuses women, right?
right.
Which, again, if you're not paying attention, then does any responsibility fall on you, Luis, at certain points? We're just going to take the movie for like its face value of what they show us here. And it's interesting that she's supposed to model self-control after seeing someone, completely not model that herself, and those are supposed to be her great role models. Maybe there's already a flaw there, because I'm not sure that the movie did that. I'm almost arguing against myself here, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm at with that. Is that you're right? It's just interesting to me that the father is holding her to a higher standard, although albeit still using women the way that other men are going to use her daughter or his
Yeah.
daughter.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think we're supposed to I think I think Pabst sets up the viewer to understand that, but doesn't necessarily take the step to have Luis understand it. So I think that's right. It's a flaw with the movie. I think it's minor because I think that it works out for the movie in the end to the way he sets it up. But yeah, I agree. There's a minor flaw there.
Yeah, and I hate that I just discovered that because I really enjoyed this movie. I kept telling
Oh,
myself that like
it's
if this it is minor, but like I kept thinking to myself, and I still do, if this movie is made today, right, or
yeah.
remade today, there's so many layers. The story is so well told. Like there's so many layers and complexities to
Mm,
these characters that could be flushed out that maybe the silent era didn't lend the opportunity to.
right. No, I think that's right.
So. Um, Interesting. What do you think of some of the character dynamics in this first act? Like Minor is the guy that plays the pharmacist who ultimately ends up uh, raping Thymian. The father seems to be basically he's the power figure, but he's also very weak, right? When it
Yeah,
comes to standing up to women. Um,
sure.
it just interesting some of the decisions that were made. What do you believe in the character dynamic that Pabst lays out for us? He set the tone. He's created an environment for us that we completely understand right away. What
Yeah.
about the character decisions that he made outside of the creepy smile of Minor? Because I think that's just silent filmmakers or
Yeah.
actors trying to find a way to act. Because it definitely we get it right away. This dude's creepy, right? Christopher Nolan doppelganger. He's creepy,
Oh
right?
man. Yeah,
Yeah.
Christopher. That's exactly right. No, yeah, I think outside of that weird, creepy smile, I think the tone is set here for kind of the character dynamics. I think it's important to note that the father here is his was Henning, right? Is the last name.
Henning. Yep.
Um, yeah. So I think it's really important that he's set up as like the power broker, but doesn't really act on that power except for when he's exploiting women, right? And so he's just, I think it's Pabst kind of saying like this isn't strength what he's doing, right? Because the rest of it is essentially him getting further and further into debt to this guy because he, doesn't actually care about his pharmacy. He cares about his handmaidens and his housekeepers. So, I think that's an important step to take that he took there. Um, excuse me, but yeah, Minor here. I mean, it's obvious, it's on the nose, but he's just a evil, creepy dude, and I think it's important to know that right away because of what's coming. So
What do you make of the of Pap's decision? And he repeats it a couple times. It's this the moment that Timian's character is being possessed.
mm,
She has a fight or flight moment and for lack of better words, chooses to I don't want to say she doesn't choose the flight, she
sure,
faints, right? Her
yeah,
body like in an attempt to protect itself shuts
yeah,
down, but in this particular situation it lends itself to not protecting itself, right? um,
sure.
so what do
Well,
you what was your take on why he chose to do that?
yeah, I'd be interested to kind of read the book and see if there's any changes here because I know this is based on a novel, and if I'm doing a little guessing here, but I believe the writer of the novel is a woman. So I'd be interested to see if there's any changes there. And actually, in this scene, I thought a lot about High Life. Do you remember that Robert Pattinson movie we saw together?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
Roughly,
yeah.
roughly, but I do remember it.
Well, yeah. Well, in that movie, there's a couple of different rape scenes, right? There's the one that's
Yep.
very aggressive and male, and then there's another that's not as aggressive and female. But both are rape. I thought it was really interesting here the choice to have Louise faint, because I do think the body's protecting itself there. The body's protecting the mind from the experience in this moment. So I do think that's a reaction that can happen. So I thought it was interesting that it happened here and then also later again in the movie. So I thought it was a pretty smart choice because it lets it lets Louise not necessarily, like, she experiences it obviously, but she also like is giving giving it away to something else. So it's happening to her, but it's not. So I just thought I thought it was a good choice.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even consider that it's protecting the mind. Yeah, you're right. It's almost protecting itself from any future trauma that could come from it because you almost can't relive it, right?
Right.
Because you almost didn't experience it, which you definitely did. But yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
interesting take on that. That's a good call because I kept sitting there watching that and wondering, um, this is deliberate. He's making this choice. Why is he making this choice? And I guess I took it more as just the sign of the times that they wanted to indicate that she's not giving consent without showing the actual physical nature of it, which is we've had a
Yeah.
couple now rape scenes in movies, and just interesting how directors both depicted them in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I think the one thing to keep in note is that when we see more as cinema kind of progresses throughout the next 100 years here, you start seeing more graphic details of rape. And I'd be curious, it's a morbid curiosity, but I'd be curious as when to what the first film was that kind of showcased the more physical nature of it, the more
Yeah.
grotesque images, and just kind of a study of why that was done, right? Other than just
Yeah.
capability of being able to do it.
Yeah. And I also like what was the motivation too, right? Because there's two different types, right? There's the person who wants to depict rape on screen could be motivated by um, showing the graphic nature at the pain that women are experiencing, or men. But then there's the other side too that gets a little bit more grotesque and gross, where it's more of like a fantasy element. And I think there's a lot of that in later film that I would just want to be careful of. But no, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's taken place today in modern day Hollywood is that, I think a lot of, especially actresses, this is talked about a lot as a talking point about how, they're fine with doing nudity as long as the nudity enhances the story, is right for the
Mhm.
character. What are the motivations behind it, right?
Yeah.
Where maybe you could go back 20 years in the 90s that had movies that had a lot of sex. And I felt like you could almost make the point that sex was in the movie because sex sells, but not necessarily enhances the story or has
Yeah.
anywhere to do with it, right? So I do think there's more of a front of the mind, uh, you know, conscious effort of people deciding to make these decisions and do
Yeah.
better by filmmaking.
Sure.
Going forward. So, one last note about just character dynamic and choices is Meinhardt's character. We see the creepy smile, but another thing that is decision is made is we see him look at like a naked photo. Now, is
Mm.
that supposed to be Thymian Louise Brooks that he might have snuck, or is that just like of another woman? Like, because that was weird. When I seen that, I thought we were going to get graphic details of rape in
Right.
this movie, and it didn't
Yeah.
showcase. But I thought that was a kind of a weird, odd choice that felt, in hindsight, felt kind of out of place.
It felt to me like it was photos that he had developed for someone else, and he was just taking a look at them.
Yep.
That's what it felt
Okay.
like to me.
Because when you go to the pharmacy in 1929, you get your pictures developed. Okay, that one went over my head. Yep. I'm so modernized, Will. I forgot what my youth was like.
Just got to get on your Tinder there, Meinert.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
want some nudes.
So after the baby is taken to the midwife, right, and
Hmm.
taken from Thymian, the character, she's now taken to the reformatory, and I felt like there was shades of the passion of Joan of Arc here. Like there was
Hmm.
some really cool. It felt like this movie was a mixture of Poor Things and The Passion of Joan of Arc at times because just the way the shots and the cinematography was used, I thought it was really cool to showcase like the head master here, which I don't believe we ever get a
Yeah.
name, but just the headmaster of the
Hmm.
reformatory. She is giving a cadence to when these women can, or these young ladies can sip their soup. And I thought the way
Yeah.
that was, you know, showcased, it was really well done because it was kind of repeat nature, wide shots into close-ups, and then you bring in the soundtrack, which kind of feeds off of that a little bit, and it just reminded me a little bit of the torture scene from The Passion of Joan of Arc, where all these quick cuttings,
Yeah.
which I thought was impactful, and I really set the tone for this is going to be an uncomfortable setting for Louise or
Oh yeah.
Timian.
Yeah. Absolutely. Some of the stuff that was going on here too. There was some distraction, right? Because there just that the bald guy had the same issue that Minard did. It's just like where he just couldn't stop creepy smiling at people, man. I don't know what's going on with that, but
Side
yeah,
note:
no,
Do you remember Bull from Night Court?
no,
Oh god,
yeah,
this was Bull from Night Court for me. I just wanted to know if you picked up on
okay.
that. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
um, yeah, no, that just agreeing with you. I think this was a really important scene to kind of make it feel uncomfortable and make it feel like she was entering a world that she just didn't know, right? So, um, as we kind of move along here in the reformatory too, there's just some weird, almost orgiastic scenes, right, with the beating of the drum and just interesting choices that maybe I don't fully understand, but thought they felt right in the moment. So, yeah, just really good stuff here in the reformatory, I thought.
Yeah, the tribal nature of the drum, right, takes me back to
Mm-hmm.
Midsummer a little bit. Things that they kind of repeated in those scenes, especially the
Mm-hmm.
final scene of that. Final 20 minutes of that epic. I I really enjoyed. I think the reformatory scenes, especially the final scene that we get of the escape, where Erica is helping her protect her diary.
Yeah,
I want to talk about the diary because it's the title of the movie.
right.
Do you feel like the diary holds a strong enough place to end up being the title of the movie? Because when I originally thought, I was like, man, in all this area of life where she has no control, I thought the diary was going to be the one thing that she kind of had control over, right? And to a sense, she did. But even early on in Act One, they break open the diary and yet
Yeah.
somehow still give her the diary, but they break open the diary to find out who the father is. And I felt like, and maybe that again, that's just more of a violation of the property that is Timian's. Where are you at with the way they use the diary throughout this movie? Before we talk about the reformatory, because that's what they're fighting about. But where are you at with the diary usage?
I think it maybe not quite enough, but or maybe I should rephrase that. I think they do a really good job with it early on, especially in this last scene of. Would you call it the last scene of the first act? That's kind of
I
what I
would
have marked out.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. That'd be the last scene of the
Yeah.
first act because she escapes and now they're on to the brothel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote down here, her story does not belong to the reformer or the count or anyone else. It is hers. So I think that's kind of the the film is kind of showing that theme, right? That her diary, her story, who she is hers, and that's why she needs to escape the reformery. So I think it's used correctly for the majority of the movie, but maybe if they remade this movie today, what would happen is you would have the main character narrating from her diary, over top of it. And I think it would probably work pretty well. But I just think there's some limitations here in the technology that they have that kind of keep it from working perfectly. So yeah, I think you're onto something here that they probably could have used it a little bit more.
I liked what they were going for. Probably, like you said, in Act One, especially, they did a really good job of passing notes. Even in Act Two, they start passing notes, right? That's ultimately how we get the escape set up. Is that there's a note written to Timian's father,
Mm-hmm.
and or not to Timian's father, but to Count Osdorf,
So, yeah,
and Count Osdorf then goes and approaches Timian's father, and so on and so on. So there is usage of the diary, and it's done, I think, pretty effectively early on. I just don't remember after the reformatory scene, actually after the escape scene where they write down the address to the brothel when it's used again. Can you
yeah.
is there another moment where that diary is used again?
Is it? I feel like it's on the beach. Um,
Okay.
After she goes to the older Count Olaf or Olaf, geez,
Is that on the beach or is that just the title plate?
oh, that's a good point. I'm not, I can't remember 100% here. So
Yeah. Well, the point is even then it falls off, right? So the point still stands. But getting back to the plot and getting back to the story, I really enjoyed that scene. You said you've already talked about the beating of the drum. This is kind of like the inmates running the asylum type thing, right? You got they're fighting back, and I really like the physicality part of it, right? Is 1929. Everything's very kind of robotic with the way they're punching down on the headmistress and punching down on
yeah,
the muscle, so to speak, right? But as far as like the shooting, the quick shots again, and the way the girls are jumping across the bed, they call this staging, right? The way the
yeah.
staging is done in this movie or in this scene is really well done, and that's the part that made me think of the torture scenes. Is just kind of the way that they emulate each other. I really,
Mm,
really enjoyed that part of the movie. I thought it was one of the probably top three scenes of the movie.
mm. Yeah, no, it was very well done. That's I have it bolded on my list here. So I definitely I agree with you.
Let's get to the act two here a little bit. And things that stuck out to me is once Erica goes back, tries to find her kid, right?
Mm,
And ultimately is told that the baby is died. I thought we were going. I thought it was a lie at first, right? I thought
mhm,
maybe Meta came back and that child that ultimately we see in Act Three at the will. I thought maybe that was her child, and maybe it is, and maybe we'll talk about it. But I thought that was where they were going to go with it right away. She's distraught. She leaves, and they end up. She finds herself at a brothel that she doesn't know is a brothel, and
mm,
Erica brings her in, and we're starting to learn a little bit more. And I thought this is the part that G.W. Pabst did a really good job. And I'm interested to get your take when we get to Act Three and just kind of what your issues were with it. I thought he did a really good job on like the exposition of Erica's character without
mm.
ever telling us anything really about Erica's character. Um, you can tell that okay, she's a wild child. But
Yeah.
she's somebody who instead of being I don't want to say innocent because clearly at this point Timian's lost her innocence, but she's still trying to dissect what it is. Like, is the world this evil or is it not? Like, I think Erica has already made the decision that yes, it is, and she's just going to suck all the nectar out of it for what she can.
Mm.
What was your thoughts on Act Two and the way the brothel kind of plays a part into her transcendence into adulthood?
Yeah, no, I thought it was really well done. I thought there was it's interesting. I thought that Erica was doing a little bit of grooming here, right? Like, hey, you should come with me to this place. Hey, you should, dance with this guy, and then, ends up back in the same kind of scenario where she ends up, fainting because she may not necessarily exactly want what's coming. So I'm interested a little bit. I think I would need to think a little bit deeper on Erica's character here, just trying to figure out what her motivations were. It kind of ends up in a good place, so I'm not. I think Pabst, because of the way that the girls and the women interact throughout the rest of the movie, they kind of become comrades, and everything's all hunky dory. And I am I am pro sex worker, right? That's if that's your chosen line, that is something that you could do. But I also, I have worries too about like, is are you forced into things because it's your only choice, right? And
Right.
that I have a little worry about that here for Thymian. So I thought it was really well done, but I also think that maybe it wasn't quite as nuanced as I wanted it to be.
I'm sorry, Will. I just know you, and I know you were having an internal dialogue of like you that needed to be said. Like you needed to say, "I'm pro sex worker" on Cinema 100. I just no. I think when I think about Erica's character, by all means, she's grooming her. Right? There's no way around it. She's grooming her, but I think in her eyes, she thinks she's protecting her. She's saying, "Own this.
Okay,
Take
yeah,
autonomy of this." Right? Because for
sure.
what she knows, this is her only way of survival. And she's
Yeah,
got a community of people who probably think like her, and even the head lady of the house. Like, there's this great moment where Count Osdorf and Erica go off into the room. And then some of the other ladies take their significant man and they go off into the room, right? And now it's just the head lady, it's Thymian, and it's the gentleman that she's with in that moment. And
hmm,
they've given her the champagne, they've given her the dress, and now they are teaching her how to dance, right? And there's this great moment where she's like excited about it. Thymian's excited about dancing at first. And then
yeah,
she looks over at the head lady who, again, is grooming her, right?
mhm,
But in some weird dichotomy is also protecting her from, at least in her eyes. But you see her just so like grinning, like almost like the guys do, the creepy smile, like the
yeah,
guys have been portrayed in this movie. Because in her eyes, it's another cash cow,
sure.
right? Um, and she's like excited about that opportunity. Where the moment she sees that, you see the joy on the head lady's face, but then Pabst makes Thymian go from joy to fear right away,
Hmm.
like seconds before we get the flight of the body. I thought that scene right there, that's the scene that made me go, okay, Pabst knows what he's doing. This movie's next level, and I'm on board for the rest of the ride.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's really well done. I just eh, get a little I just get a little precarious in situations like this because I don't like to make claims that are 100 like
You're
I
not
don't like
married
to
to,
make yeah,
yeah.
I'm just not well, that's one thing, but also too like I think sometimes we lack nuance when we just automatically agree with something because
Right.
it fits our overall belief. So I'm just being a little more hesitant than you, but no, I think you're right.
Yeah, I just think that there's got to be a little bit of benefit of the doubt when we're doing, especially things like this, right? We're on an
Yeah.
hour podcast trying to give our thoughts on a movie, um,
Hmm.
that has to do with these types of narratives, and I just think in order to conclude one's opinion on something because they gave you some semblance of an agreement in one direction, I just think is completely unfair to us, and unfair
Yeah.
to anybody that has an intelligent mind. And I think anybody that has an intelligent mind wouldn't do that, and therefore I that's my audience. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just cursed. I'm the Sicilian in Princess Bride who just keeps keeps going down. When he's deciding which goblet to drink out of, right? Like he just keeps saying like, and you put it in this one, and no, you put it in this one, like because I can't. I just can't ever just stop. I just can't. So sorry,
Nope,
sorry everyone.
got it, buddy. Fair enough, fair enough. um where do you believe act 2 ends? Where does act 3
Um,
begin for you, and where does act 2 end?
so I
Do
have
you believe
Act
it
Two.
ends with the father and daughter seeing each other at the city club?
Yeah, that's where I have it too. The doctor character, is it Vidor or Vitor or something like that?
I didn't quite catch that. I know Vitor is
Yeah.
the director of the last movie we just watched.
Oh,
I thought
okay.
it had a Z in it, Zividel or
Oh,
something.
anyway, the doctor Vitalis,
Vitalis. Okay.
Vitalis. So yeah, so I have it at when he kind of says, we get that card, the now you are truly lost, like the rest of us. I think that's where we have the end of Act Two. That's right at the end of that scene, when she sees her father again. So yeah, I'm on board with that.
Can we talk about Dr. Vitalis real quick? Interesting
Sure.
character, right? Not in the movie a lot. Maybe two crucial scenes. We were introduced to him at the end when she decides to, or the end of Act Two when she decides to start teaching dancing and taking this job
Mhm.
on. Um, and again, it's the hypocrisy of the human being, right? He's participating in the very thing that he thinks makes her lost, but he's, as he will allude to in the next scene, we're all lost. So he
Yeah.
is kind of trying to balance like the short-term pleasure for the long-term goal of, like, as we all do as adults, just trying to figure out that balance of when do you allow the temptations to take over and win the moment, and when do you not, because it might be detrimental to the long-term health. I just
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting kind of, and we got that clear as day, in my opinion, in the two scenes he was in.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I thought he was vital to the movie. I think it comes back to comes back to Aristotle, Rob. Life in moderation, man. Like this is, I think, the point here, right? Like it's okay to want things. It's okay to do things as long as it's not your whole life. So I really think that's what this character kind of comes down to, right? Like they're they're lost because they can't. They're lost because they can't stop. This is their life. It's not part of their life. It just is. So I think that's what it comes down to here.
Yeah, it's that constant, and maybe in his case, because he's well into his, it looks like 50s here in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, he it's almost like he wishes he wasn't these things, has no idea how to stop being these things because of maybe the environment that he'll face afterwards, um,
Yeah.
and all the insecurities that come with that. And that's
Sure.
a story of human tale that continues to be told. So,
Yeah.
3 years pass. We're in Act Three. Give me your pros of what you liked about this act, but then tell me the issues that you have.
Yeah. No, everything was hunky dory until we get to the Count or Osdorf's. Is it? I think Count Osdorf is the uncle, right? And then Osdorf is like the nephew, and it doesn't matter. The one who jumps out the window.
Yes. Let's just call him
Yeah,
Osdorf, and then his uncle. Well, let's just call him Osdorf, and then we'll call the other one Uncle.
little Ozzy.
Yeah.
So after he jumps out the window is where it kind of starts to feel a little Deus Ex Machina, right? Like the God in the Machine. Like we've got a we've got a story, we've got something that needs to end. So I'm gonna throw in this plot device in order to allow me to tell the story that I want to tell. So I feel like that's kind of where we we fall off a little bit. It's not severe because I still think that final act in the reformatory school is really important and really well done, but kind of how they get there is it's just a little forced. So that's really my major complaint with the movie, but it didn't ruin the movie. It's just the one thing that bugged me.
No, and for my research that I read, that was the day GW Pabst took off and Harry Beaumont stepped in. He said, "This movie needs a death." So we're just gonna kill this guy right now. We're gonna do it by
Oh
jumping out
man,
of a window. Um,
that's good.
it was so abrupt. You're right. It's so
Yeah,
spoon fed. It's not even spoon fed. It's
yeah,
killing off of a part of the story because you have to, and you really give it no second thought on how to get there, otherwise. And
yeah,
you're right. It's small, and it does catapult us to her next part of her progression. It gets us to the uncle. It gets us to him making amends. But I kind of thought that Osdorf's character the whole time was kind of lacking. Personally, we get this
yeah,
weird scene where he's trying to milk a cow that feels out of place to the rest of the movie, just
yeah,
to tell us that he's not capable of doing any jobs and that the uncle is going to disown him. I felt like maybe through other ways of exposition we could have got there. Maybe through a short back and forth nature between Thymian and him. Somehow we could have got to this exposition or this
Yeah.
conclusion without having that scene at all. And I'm not really sure the purpose of that scene outside of that.
Yeah, no, it's really just to set the stage for his incompetence. Also, like, there's some kind of gray area here too, because it has been kind of cut back together by all the different institutions that worked on putting this back together. I can't remember all of them, but yeah, I mean, I think they're just trying to set up his incompetence so we can at the end Count Osdorf can bring her Thymian under his wing so that she can have a proper reformation and not one that's tainted by that school. So
Yeah, yeah, and it's needed because we've got to get to the place where Count Osdorf meets his cousins, right? And that ultimately is the cousins who want to set up and make her Thymian the director of this reformatory school, or have her go there and kind of sit in on the board. Which, man, dude, I was never thought, like, I don't know about you, but when we get there, it's never stooged, right? We never think we're going to get to this moment. But even when we get there and we see this great bowing scene between the kind of the bully at the reformatory, and now he is emasculated, right? His power has been taken away when it comes to Thymian and the way that he can address her. And
mhm.
right away, he sees her and he bows, right? And there's a story of class again here.
Yeah.
Know your place, and you can have as much power as you have as long as you're doing it to the right type of people. And it's like, wow, that story was told really well done too, just in that quick little back and forth. But then to get to the part where there's this particular case of a troubled youth, the moment we got there, I was like, oh my God, Erica's back in. What I just thought it was really well done. It brought everything together full circle. And now Thymian has to make a decision on how she's going to do it. She's got to find her voice. This whole time, she has not had a voice. In a silent film, she needed to have a voice. And we get it at the end. And
Hmm.
I don't think it needed to be any more than what it was.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great that Count Osdorf, the uncle, gave her the support that she needed to be able to make that decision, because so often all the adults have failed her along the way. So just, dude,
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed the movie. I really enjoyed this conclusion. Um,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you put it really well here, because I kind of was a little bit more uneasy with the ending, but I think that you kind of framed this really nicely, because I hadn't really thought um about like her finding her voice in this moment, right? Because I was kind of obsessing over how we got to this moment too
Sure.
much. But the moment's really important because, as you said, like, there's this. She's not just trying to find her voice, but she needs someone to support her so that she can have a voice. And I think that's kind of the message of the movie too. Is not like, hey, we should all find our voice, but like, we need to set up structure in order for people to find their voice, right? And yeah, I thought it was really well executed here. At the end, I was curious too about about Erica's kind of story here too. I was, I was wondering how she got back here, maybe a little bit too much, rather than just kind of trying to understand what the message was. So no, I think you put it really well.
The only confusion I have with Erica's character would be who's sending her there? How's she getting there? Is it police thinking
Mm,
okay, and then there's a judge ordered way for her to get back there? Because it never throughout the movie do they showcase that the reformatory has like a search unit, out
mm,
looking for troubled youth, and we
mm.
don't get any kind of exposition that Erica has parents that are out for her. So there is flaws there, right? We just kind of take it for, again, like, just
Yeah.
matter of fact, part of the story. Did you pick up on anything else with how she continues to find herself in this school?
No, I would imagine that it's parents realizing that she's gotten out again. So they go looking for her and find her in her normal spot. So
Sure. Um, I want to ask you a question about themes because we talked a lot
Sure.
about themes here, but just one about like the overall. I'm all about what is the director trying to say here, right? And I love melancholy little snippets of melancholy in my movies. Uh, it's, who am I kidding? I like a lot of melancholy, as long as it's done in an organic way. I feel like the last line of the movie, which is done by the uncle, right? He says, just a little more love and nobody would be lost in the world. Now, a lot of people take messages like that and are like, oh, we got the message. You didn't have to tell us that. Why? You know what I mean? Let us decide what the final message is. Where me, I'm like, no, it needs to be direct for the people that don't pick up on the message. You know what I mean? It needs to be
Mhm.
hit. But I want to ask you this question about by delivering this message is because to me it's deliberate and the director wants us to read it, wants us to hear it. Is that what he believes this movie was about? Was a lack of love? And is there really an argument? I mean, is he making those arguments about patriarchy and making, you know what I mean? Like, are those really at play here? Or am I oversimplifying just, 12 words in a sentence or whatever it ended up being?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm wondering maybe there's a little there's just with German to English can sometimes get a little tricky. I'm not like a German scholar or anything like, but I do know Germans have words for a lot of things. Like they have a lot of words that we don't have because they just have a tradition in philosophy. So I'm just wondering if maybe that word love here we're taking a little too literally. It
Okay.
could mean like maybe it could just mean we need to care for each other better, or more efficiently. We need to love is action. Like it could be a number of different things here. So I think it ends up working if we kind of define love as acting with others and for others.
Okay. I'll buy that. And even if it's not, right? This is the thing I love
Mhm.
about art because this is a piece of art, right? Is that the moment you create the art and you put it out for the world to critique, it really is no longer just yours, right?
Yeah.
And even if the director failed, to send me or even if the director was not attempting to send a message about patriarchy and the things of and ownership and women's autonomy, and it was just about the literal term of love, um, I can watch this movie 100 years later and apply to it whatever I feel the message was. That's the great
Mhm.
thing about art is my interpretation to it. So maybe even despite him, I got there.
Mhm.
But we believe that there was a little bit more of a conscious effort for it to get there. So yeah, I
Yeah.
just that little tidbit about art I think is fascinating.
Yeah. No, the thing that's besides that's fascinating is just with art because it's so subjective, because you can apply so many different perspectives to the piece itself. It just I was thinking about this the other day actually with Dune too, because like it's getting universal praise, but not everyone loves it, right? So like if you go looking for the bad reviews, like there's people that write bad reviews about it. So it's just I'm thinking about things like this where we can feel so fully with our hearts that this was a great piece of art, and then there's probably people who look at this and just go meh, so it's just that's the frustrating part about art to me is like there is no universal beautiful thing.
Man, Will, way to just yeah, you're right. There isn't. There is no universal beautiful thing, and I don't even know where I want to go with that. It just I thought that was a really good point. Um, I think with my experience when I really strive for something to be universal, right?
Hmm.
It's like wow, like when I saw Poor Things, I was like, well, you got to see this, right?
Yeah.
Or like with you, you're like Dune 2, you're like Rob, see it on the biggest screen you possibly can. Um, you know, when something is universally loved, I do question. I'm not saying there's not a place, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that's maybe I return more into the way you approach things, like more cynically. With I question people's negative reviews of something that does seem to be more universally loved, right? Um, that doesn't mean that they're wrong, and it doesn't mean that they didn't come to their conclusion authentically. But sometimes, as people prop up something, everybody else, some others like to go left when everybody else is going right, just for the
Right.
sake of doing so, right? But I am somebody that, like, when I love something, I will seek out a bad review or two or three just to kind of see what the opposite argument was. And I thought, for example, for Poor Things, and the same argument can be made here. Maybe not so much, but because this movie is taking place in literal 1929, right? So, like, what are the options for women to get out of their situation as far as when it comes to poverty, right? So,
Hmm.
women's autonomy of their body and the choices that they make with their body is one thing that they can do in 1929. Poor Things, they could have set that time in any time frame. Now, I think it mimics a time that is close to this, right? What was the time frame of Poor Things, you think? Was it like 1915, 1920?
Well, how old would Frankenstein's monster be? That's what I think the time frame is. So
Okay.
probably early 1900s. Yeah.
Okay, so again, for Bella Baxter's character, it's not too unfair to say that she wouldn't be a sex worker. So, you know, and when I was reading the reviews of Poor Things, some of the things that people said was like, wow, the only way women can achieve autonomy is through the giving up their body. And it's like, I get that point. Yep, I get it. Um, but I do think that, time matters too, and opportunities and choices, those matter too. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, long-winded way of saying that I want to make sure that people's negative reviews of things that are universally loved are authentic. So,
Yeah.
um, final opinions, and what was your rating of this?
Yeah. So I think I think maybe our conversations got me leaning towards a 4.5. I was kind of at a 4 because had a very strong weight on that final act, not working as well for me. But I think you kind of placed that final scene into some perspective for me to make a little bit more sense. So, I haven't finished writing my review yet, but I'll plan on by the time I get done, I'll probably talk myself into a 4.5.
See, I always tend to go backwards. Like the longer time has been since I've seen something, I'm like, was that really that good? I'm gonna drop it down a half point, and then when I watch it again, I'm like, oh my god, I got to get that fixed.
Yeah.
The little nuances. So,
Yeah.
uh, let me ask the four big questions. Should this have been drafted?
Yeah, I think so. It, we, I drafted it because I thought it was something a tiny bit different. I thought we were getting into something more abortion related, um, but I still think it was the right choice, even though it didn't really have anything to do directly with that. So,
Right. Yeah. Is this a rewatchable for you?
yeah, I think so. I think if I don't know a lot about the George Pabst here, but if we get into anything else of his, it might be interesting to come back to this.
No, agree. I hope we do find more films of his. To be honest with you, and then is this movie a masterpiece?
It's close. I think it's really close. I'm not sure if I'm willing to commit to it yet, but it's close.
It's close. I agree. I think um, there's story structure things that you can pick holes in. There's character development you can pick holes in. And again, we're just taking the reconstruction of this movie the way that we've seen it. So I think it's close. I don't think it is, but I do think it's
Yeah.
close. I'm with you on that one. And finally, well, we don't have to answer that one because we have already explained for the last hour why we would watch it. So, um, that's movie number 5, Will. We're on to
All
movie
right.
number 6, which is the last movie of our 1920s, 1929 class, the last movie of the decade before we hit 1930, brother.
I know. It's zooming right along here. We'll be in 2030 before we know it.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about how we can. It's funny. I'm just thoroughly enjoying it. I'm in no hurry.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be in a little bit more of a hurry than we are. I don't know. But I, I I I look forward to having that conversation with you. Let's talk about
Yeah.
Escape from Dartmoor. Okay, it's a British part-talkie sound film directed by Anthony Asquith, and it came out at the latter part of October of 1929. Movie only runs 77 minutes, according to Wikipedia, which we've been using as our universal truth. Um, I believe. Am I wrong? Was this one of your picks? Your last pick?
Yeah. Oh, I think we.
I mean, I
I
had it on there too, and we kind of came to
yeah.
a consensus, right?
I think this was my last pick. Yeah. So yeah. Also, just for anybody who's watching along too, this goes by Escape from Dartmoor or A Cottage on Dartmoor. So you gotta. It's the same movie. So if you find A Cottage on Dartmoor, that's the same movie that we'll be watching. So um, just wanted to make sure that was out there as well.
No, that's a great little anecdote there because it's so funny. You just blew my mind with that because I thought originally I wrote down Cottage of Dartmoor from Dartmoor, and I'm like, why do I keep thinking it's that? So yeah, I'm glad you just kind of helped me out there. So
Yeah, no, this is another one of those foreign films. So sometimes you get different titles in different areas for stuff like that. So
for sure, for sure.
yeah,
Give the tagline here just so people can get excited about what that's going to be about. A former barber escapes from a high security prison. Flashback story of an escape from the lonely, high security Dartmoor prison. So maybe Shawshank Redemption before we get to Shawshank Redemption. Who knows? Maybe a little inspiration there from
the
our
poster's got a
American.
tree.
What's that? Oh, yeah, you're right.
Poster's got a tree.
What if we find out that, like, word for word, nobody ever saw this movie and, like, verbatim, this movie was stolen?
Oh man, that would be embarrassing for Shawshank Redemption.
Well, no, because the pressure would be on you and me, Will. We would have to be the ones to whistle blow. And are we going to ruin an American, like, icon of a film for the. I don't know. That's pressure. Would you do it?
No, well, I can't whistle right now. I'm sick. So
Fair enough. Um, Anything else you want to talk about? I didn't have any hard hitting questions. The only thing I had today was a doppelganger of Christopher Nolan. Sometimes we get into kind of stories like this that have kind of a heavy theme. I feel like hard hitting questions might not have a place. So I decided to stay away from it this time. I don't know about you, Will. Did you have any?
Uh, no, not really. I thought maybe we would talk a little bit more about the incredible dance lessons that Thymian was giving, but besides that, I didn't really have much. So
If I
just
recall, I think Tynan and I did that at our senior prom. So yeah, that was the
there you go.
yeah. Uh, all right. We will wrap up this one here, but we'll see you guys next week for our last movie of the 1920s. And then after that, we will probably have our draft and our Oscars for the 1929 draft class and all the things that come with that. So you guys stay tuned and keep watching movies.
All right, we'll see you.